And good evening, everyone. Right now I'm a bit... I'm not quite sure if we had audio there, but if not, then I am sorry for any technical hiccups I did.
No, I think we did have audio there. I was very able to hear it when I was listening on YouTube just there.
Okay, that is
Everyone good
good.
in the chat? You can all hear us properly.
That is
Hello,
good.
everyone.
Yeah.
For anyone who doesn't... Whoops, sorry.
Welcome to another episode with Heart of Europa. I am Lynx from Norway, and with me I have my co-host, as usual. And this is where the co-host usually introduces herself.
To my unmute button, just fiddling around with the entropy. Hello, my name's Katrina. I am the co-host of Half Europa, for anyone who is new. And tonight we are discussing Lord of the Rings, everyone's favorite fantasy epic. Or at least, a lot of people's. Definitely. And we have a special guest tonight. Yeah. Yes, you know actually a lot more about it than me. You're a big fan.
Yeah.
Aren't you, Lynx?
Oh yeah. I have a yearly watch during this time of the extended films. So
nice.
And I've listened to the audiobooks almost 3 times since Christmas. So yeah, quite a fan.
One could say so. But yes, our special guest tonight, Loralee Scaife, who is the Lord of the Rings expert. Hello, Loralee.
Hello, Katrina and Lynx. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about talking with you both and your audience about Lord of the Rings.
Definitely our pleasure. You were actually one of the first ones I wanted to have as a guest on the show when we started talking about it and everything. So I'm really glad to have you on. You are making, you're not done yet as far as I know, a series on analyzing the Lord of the Rings, in particular the movies, as how you can see it as a myth for our times. So
yes.
Could you please just tell us a bit about yourself and how you got into this?
Well, the way it kind of all came to me was quite synchronistic and rather surprising, because I had not really known anything about the Lord of the Rings other than it was written by Tolkien and that he wrote children's stories, and isn't that nice? It just was sort of something that I heard about along the way during my studies of Jungian psychology and astrology that began in the late 1970s. So once I discovered Jung and began looking into archetypal psychology and mythology, and going quite deep into all of that for about 20 some odd years. And what particularly was getting my attention towards the end of the 1990s was the matter of evil. And so I was really diving into the nature of evil and looking into all that entailed. And then in 2001, of course, in September, we had the big 9/11 event that obviously shocked the world and brought to my attention the fact that evil was not just something that we dealt with in terms of personal shadow, but rather there was a force of evil, or the anti-life force, that was at work in the larger world, and that we as modern human beings really needed a more sophisticated understanding of evil. And so after that 9/11 event, I was going more into looking at how evil was manifesting in the larger collective. And then a couple of months later, the first of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Fellowship of the Ring, appeared in theaters, and that was my first introduction to Tolkien's work. And it absolutely blew my mind. And I saw right away that this was the myth for our time, that it was laying out, just like an operating manual for our particular human development, that is specifically the men and women of the West, the peoples of the Arctic homeland, the northern European peoples. And that this myth, Lord of the Rings, is a distillation of myths, stories, and legends that have that are ancient, thousands of years old. The bits and pieces of that kind of distilled down to this particular story that touches in on so many things, history, and certainly the ancestors, the importance for us as people of the Arctic homeland, the descendants of people of the Arctic homeland, because much of our rituals and sacred, what was held sacred to our ancestors, has been lost to a large degree, or let's just say repressed. And that repressing of those stories and our heritage has contributed to the sorry state of our world at the moment. So that really opened the door for
Absolutely.
me. Yeah. And so from there, I began to really take the story apart bit by bit and analyze it as if it were a dream. So I employed a technique used in Jungian dream analysis called amplification. And I'm basing this on the notion that both Jung and Joseph Campbell presented, that myth is to a culture what dreams are to the individual. In other words, a myth that is powerful and speaks to the deep psyche is like a collective dream. It's like
Mm.
the dream of an entire culture. And so amplification is a technique whereby you take the symbols, the characters, the symbols, and the images, and unpack them according to what those symbols represent, looking both into ancient symbolism and then bringing it forward to connect to symbolism and synchronicities and things that are occurring now in our life
Mm.
presently.
And I was saying just before the stream actually that as a heathen, an Odinist, or a Reconstructionist, pagan, that sort of thing, where the myths are the collective unconscious, the dream of the culture,
Mhm.
and the fact that you could maybe use amplification
Mm.
on the symbols in them. That was an idea that was certainly intriguing to me.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Well, and just the aspect of studying symbolism, it, even apart from this particular story, it is something that I think has been lost to some extent in our culture, because that doesn't seem to conform to this like left brain so-called scientific analysis. Oh well, dreams are just, they're just manifestations of brain chemicals and they don't really mean anything at all, and therefore we shouldn't bother paying attention to either
Yeah.
dreams or mythology. And yet contained within both dreams and myth is the
A
ancient
lot
wisdom.
of truth, yeah.
And it's, as I like to say, it's like the operating manual for how to be a human. So just as other creatures learn how to be their creature self based on their genetic inheritance. So they're programmed, birds just sort of automatically know how to build nests and how to communicate with each other and do what needs to be done. Well, human beings learn how to be human by myths and stories and legends.
I think that back in the day, people knew allegories way better than they do these days. So that is part of the language that has been lost over the years.
Yes.
And when we see what was going on in the 1800s with the romantics and everything, it seems like they were searching back to some foundation. And I think Tolkien is, a descendant of that. So he did say he wanted to create a myth for the English people.
Yes, a myth of their own.
Yeah, and we see the same with Wagner, who we opened up with tonight. As you talked with Jared George about and John on Learning in Public.
John Bruce Leonard, yes.
Yeah. I keep forgetting his last name. It's so it's embarrassing. But much of that same impulse was coming through in the 50s and 60s. That was something I saw quite a few years back when I've seen looked back at that time, in that they wanted to go return to something more natural, and then was subverted and led astray. So I do think that is something very deep in us, and it's I would say it's basically impossible to eradicate, really, because it will bubble back at one point or another.
Yes, you cannot repress, or you can attempt to repress something that is a natural function of the psyche, but anything that is repressed doesn't go away. It simply builds up energy in the unconscious and then motivates behavior in ways that we don't understand. It becomes what we call the shadow.
Yeah, and as we talked about before we went on air, I see something similar in many New Age group.
Oh yeah.
With it's again that search for something more natural. Even though many people talk very universally, I do think it's a longing for their roots.
Yes.
So I do think we have a return of that these days. And I wasn't too young when the films came out. I got to see how the youth reacted to that up close and personal.
Yeah.
The energy in the air was palpable. Not necessarily with the older generations, but with the youth, it was really strong. People.
Now, what do you mean by youth? Like, what age range are you talking about?
Teens, 20s, maybe 30s.
Okay.
When
the films first came out in 2001, you're thinking Okay. Hmm.
So
Yeah.
basically, people from 70s, 80s, and perhaps 90s.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, it was still a very popular book before that. I knew some people who were really big fans of it.
Mm.
But when the movies came out, it was basically erupting like a volcano, it seemed.
That's right. Yeah.
It definitely touched on something very primal,
Yes.
something that really hit people in the soul, I would say.
Hmm. Definitely.
So,
I mean,
yeah.
It awakened something.
Hmm.
that's interesting. I do not remember when they came out,
Mm.
the movies. I don't think that I would have been of the age to remember. Maybe I
Okay.
don't know.
That's really interesting.
When did they come out again? What year were we saying?
2001. Yeah, in
Oh,
December 2001, I was living in California at the time, and yeah, first appeared in theaters December
hmm.
2001, the first film.
But having watched them, I could see how they were very powerful
Oh yeah.
on the big screen,
Hmm. And
especially.
it part of what got my attention was the dreamlike quality of the imagery. See, another thing that we have to keep in mind is that the special effects and all that kind of stuff at that time was pretty new. It compared to what it is now. I mean, it's all CG and it's all, special effects and razzle dazzle. But at that time, it was a very new thing. And so I think it really hit people because we hadn't seen that sort of special effect, sort of dreamlike quality in films before, at least not to that level.
Yeah, the whole aesthetic was uh, what's the best word? It wasn't just new, but it was very particular. It wasn't
Hmm.
really that was seen in any other movies at that same time, at least that I
Right.
know of. So the whole design, from everything from clothes to the sets
Yes.
and everything, it was uh, um, something very new, and yet it all harkened
Mm.
back to something older. So
Hmm.
I definitely think that was also a reason for it to hit people so strongly.
Yes. Hmm.
I mean, yeah, all the other films that try to do that sort of aesthetic now, like you watch Lord of the Rings, and it's clear that that is the original.
Yeah.
That is where the aesthetic comes from,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone does it quite as well.
No, I'm Peter Jackson did a miraculous job there. Uh, Bringing the written story, the original stories onto the screen. I mean, it was a monumental task, and he did follow as much as possible the original story, and didn't inject a whole lot of his own sort of perspective. Tried to follow it as much as possible, and the screenwriters, who both were
Mm.
women, um, made a few changes in the story. Number one, they had to fit it all into a reasonable amount of time, and I always encourage people, if they're going to be watching it, to watch the extended edition, because the films that appeared in theaters, they were cut down to fit, an hour and a half or so, which I guess is the attention span of people who go to theaters. But anyway, there were pieces cut out in order to fit the theater version that I felt were really, really important. So I would highly recommend anybody who hasn't seen the extended edition to indeed watch that, because
Uh,
it fills in a lot of
Mm.
gaps in the story. But there were a couple of changes that I thought were made that I thought were more relevant to our time, and one of them was the dream of the great wave that in the original novels is given to Faramir. And in the film version, that dream is given to Eowyn. And I felt that it was much more relevant to Eowyn's journey and her maturation than to Faramir. So I made note of that.
Mm.
And let's see what else. Well, there were a couple of other more, sort of minor
Yeah.
changes that, some
Mm.
characters saying things that were actually attributed to one of the other characters in the novels. But anyway, just
Yeah.
overall, to take that a vast body of work like Tolkien's trilogy and put it on
Oh,
the
yeah.
screen is, unbelievable. And
Quite an
just as
old
a little
task.
aside, if any of you, if you or any of your listeners um ever did get the original like DVD extended version, where there's in the appendices they talk a lot about the making of the films, and all the bizarre stuff that happened, the synchronistic stuff, and just weird, strange events that took place during the making of the films, that I also thought was fascinating, because that's the power of myth. I wish that
Mm.
I could talk to the characters, and to the actors, and ask them, you know, how did this affect you? Has it lived with you
Mm.
through, in the aftermath of just playing that role? Because they were all like they did all three films kind of at once.
Yeah.
And they were more or less cloistered together during that time while they were filming. And I think that is kind of unusual sometimes in
Yes.
filmmaking. So the whole thing was unusual. And I think it speaks to the power of the psyche, and that when a profound and deep myth comes to the consciousness of the people in a particular culture at a time of tremendous chaos and breakdown of society. I mean, we are in a place of transformation and metamorphosis right now, and that we're undergoing a death for the purpose of rebirth, and we need to have a connection to our ancestral path and the myths and the stories and the sacredness of things that were
Mm.
done in the ancient past that helped our people deal with what was presented to them in those
Yeah.
times. And since that has been, I believe, willfully taken from us, I don't think this was an accident. And so now we're in this place whereby, due to having our sacred ancient rituals and meaning of life repressed and usurped and twisted, that we've been infantilized, and that is one
Mm.
of the things that it is a product, or at least we see it most obviously during what took place in the 1960s. So there was this natural awakening of, the realization that in the aftermath of the wars and the terrible death and destruction that went on during that time, and then in the aftermath in the 1950s, people just wanted to return to some kind of normalcy and try to rebuild their world. But I think the trauma was not dealt with, and the psychological trauma, and so that there was a lot of repression and a lot of pretending that then so for example, my uh, parents were just trying to live, just trying to, okay, we survived the wars and now we gotta like try to return to some kind of normal life, but we can't really because a lot of it has been destroyed. We don't have access to the deep knowledge and wisdom of our ancestors. And so a lot of it just looked like pretending. So we're going to pretend now that everything's good and everything's nice, and we're just going to, carry on. And we're not going to deal with any of this
Yeah,
underlying psychological
a
trauma and
lot of that.
wounding. And so as a result, by the time, my generation, I was born in 1952. So I was going through my teen years in the mid 1960s. And it was a very confusing time because there was this sense of why are all the adults pretending that everything's great when it clearly is not, and and then we're given this other model of, oh, okay, well now you can just throw away your parents values and all that took place prior to this, and now we're all going to be like, maenads running around and having no boundaries and
Yeah,
having no way to become adults.
it was a reaction and it went too far the other
Absolutely.
way. And
Yes.
I guess one of the things that you keep bringing up in your analysis of Lord of the Rings is balance, because
Yes.
you're talking about finding your inner king as a man and your inner queen as a woman, but you also talk about the concept of you have both of those things. You
Yes.
have the opposite number as a man and as a woman, and
Mm-hmm.
really bringing balance to the forces
Mm-hmm.
in your life and in your psyche so that they're all working harmoniously with one another.
And consciously.
Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah, we have to be conscious of the inner opposite, or what Jung called the contrasexual. And
Hmm.
and that's another component that contributes to this infantilization. And then projection. So what we're unconscious of in terms of the contrasexual, the inner opposite, or what Jung called the anima and the animus. So the
Yes, maybe we
masculine.
better explain those. Yes.
Yeah, well, it's obviously a complex subject that
Oh yeah.
Jung wrote about very deeply, and yeah, but in a nutshell, basically the inner feminine in the man, or the inner queen in the man, is what Jung named the anima, and then the inner masculine or king within the woman he called the animus. And so when you live in a female body, you are conscious of being a female because your whole physiology and everything that you're made of is based on the idea and the reality that you are a woman. And this, of course, is now a controversial thing that apparently there's not no such thing as men and women anymore. But we'll leave that aside for the moment and just concentrate on the on Jung's concept of wholeness as being the integration of these opposites. And so for a man needs to become more conscious of this inner feminine quality. And in the process of doing that, he finds a relationship to that part of himself. And according to Jung, it is it's the inner woman, the anima, that is the guide to the man's soul. And for a woman, it's the inner king, the inner masculine, that creates for the woman a solid realm where she can do what women do, that is, bring forth life. But if there is not a sense of safety, security, and comfort, then we as women feel insecure and fearful that if we bring forth life in the form of children or in other different ways creatively, that there's no one around, there's nothing there to protect and defend. And so then women start to act like men and project out that masculine onto outer men in the outer world, or onto authority figures, and either rail against their domination and whatever, or to simply try to act like men and deny their own femininity.
Yeah, I think Eowyn is a very good image of women today.
Yes.
Because she wants to be the warrior. She wants to go to the battlefield and win honor and glory. And that really is, I don't think it's much more that is more masculine than going physically to war to win glory and honor and everything.
Right.
And what I have seen, I don't say this started with Lord of the Rings, but it's something I've seen over the years, in that Hollywood have really grasped onto that idea and is really pushing, the female warriors and heroes and everything, and really just subverting girls and young women in that sense. And it ends up being completely it can be dangerous, actually, because a woman can then put herself in a situation where she thinks she can, for example, win a fight with a man or something, and get knocked out.
You see that?
Yeah, there's so many videos.
See female policewomen who think they can do things.
Yeah,
I know.
It's very concerning.
Because because they physically don't have the strength. It's just a matter of physics.
It sure is.
Yeah, and we
now of reality.
Yeah. So I would say that women today are at the beginning of Eowyn's journey, where she still wants to be that warrior and everything. And we have to start to realize that we're not warriors in that sense.
Not in that sense.
We have our own strength, definitely. So if we then look at the end of Eowyn's journey, she realizes that she's a healer. She gets married to Faramir, and I assume that they had children and everything. So she finds her place.
Yeah.
And
she matures.
Yeah, and that is not where women are today, unfortunately. So we have to facilitate that. There was a stream around Christmas with Philosophicat. She was a guest at Hearth and Helm. And she was asked the question of how to sort of I don't remember exactly how it was phrased, but basically, how do we become women as women? And Philosophicat really put the words in put into words what I've been feeling, in basically just stop getting in our own way and just be women. Just realize that we're not a heroine in a Hollywood movie.
Yes.
Um,
Oh God.
Oh my goodness, that has messed up ideas of romance
yeah.
Oh,
and of
destroyed.
dating and
Yeah.
relationships with so many women.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Just unattainable ideas for those men, ideals for those men to live up to.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
for women too. I mean,
Hmm.
it's completely insane. Um, they now have they're making flight suits for women in the Air Force for pregnant women.
Hmm.
Like, what? So now, not only are you, I mean, apparently it's all rolled out as being this is equality, that a pregnant woman can go to battle, flying airplanes, I guess. I guess that's the idea, that you can become a pilot, you could drop bombs on, you know, third world people while you're pregnant, because now they're making sure that pregnant women have
Wow.
flight suits that fit them while they're bombing other people. I mean, it's just utterly bizarre. And it
Yeah.
speaks to one of the most chilling things that struck me with Lord of the Rings when I first saw it, was the fact that all the mothers die of grief.
Yeah, I didn't think of that until I saw your series.
Yeah.
Um, I've
And just like let that sink in for a minute. Like, whoa.
yeah, I haven't really looked into much of the appendices and everything in the books, so I haven't really known that much of the backstory. But I don't have a problem with
Mm.
movies like that is male heavy in the casting and everything. I enjoy that
Yeah.
really well.
Yeah.
So I hadn't really thought about it, consciously. So when it was
Yeah.
pointed out, it was just whoa. And
Yeah.
what
Mm.
does it also say when the women are absent? Look at the Ents. They lost the Entwives.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so
Oh.
Uh,
throughout the story, there's not only are there not any, you don't see any mothers now, except towards the or right near the end, right at the end actually, when the hobbits come back to the Shire and Sam marries Rosie, and then there is the implication that they have a family and children. So that's sort of the first image really of an actual mother with a baby, and children. But what's so powerful and profound about just that statement that the mothers die of grief? So what does that mean? And they die of grief as a consequence of being exposed to evil. And I think in how we're seeing that in our time is through this psychological warfare that is teaching young women that you're having a child is like a problem. It's more like a something that is a bother to a woman, that really women should be warriors, they should be out there fighting, and they should be doing the competing with men in the men's world. And as you described, the movie propaganda is rolling this out like day after day after day, and keeping women in like a condition of infertility. And I think that is evil. I think that is anti-life, to be pounding on this and putting this out in that powerful kind of propaganda, that women not only don't have to be, but even there's the implication that you shouldn't be aspiring to motherhood,
yeah.
like it's a lesser thing somehow.
Mm.
Yeah, that is one point that I don't see talked about that much. In that industrialization came for the women as well. So many of our tasks have been taken over by
Yeah.
machines in the home.
That's right.
But we still have a need to work for our family to do something, be constructive and everything. So in that sense, it's not so irrational to want to have a job to help
Yeah.
provide for the family and everything.
Yeah.
No, in
But
that sense, no.
no. But what I saw, I was born in the 80s, so it was the women of the 70s who, quote unquote, stood on the barricades that raised me in daycare and everything, and it
Oh, wow.
seemed like they hadn't thought it through.
Yeah.
They had just swallowed the propaganda, because
That's
when
right.
they, quote unquote, gained the right to work if they wanted to, as the propaganda was said to me, they hadn't thought about what was to be done with the children when they were at work. So then they had to, quote unquote, fight to get daycare for them.
To
And
outsource their childcare. Yeah. Whoa.
yeah, and I'm Norwegian, and that whole thing came really strongly here. So being a stay-at-home mom is really rare. By the time I was in my mid-20s, I had literally known in my personal life 5 families where the wife was at home. 2 of those were artists, so they worked from home.
Wow.
And so the message I got was that women didn't want to be with their children.
Yeah.
And then I started asking myself, but why do they have children if they don't want to spend time with them?
That's right. Yeah.
And yeah, all of that really created a bit of a mess in my head that I had to figure out. And I think I was more conscious of it from a very early age than most. And by the time, by 10 years later or something, that the woman was working, that had been naturalized, that was normalized. And as each generation comes and goes, they lose more touch with that older reality. So where your generation, Loralee, they had a foundation that was a bit lost for my generation. And when my generation have our kids and send them to daycare and everything, then more is lost. So it's a slippery slope.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I would just like to highlight some comments that came up in the chat. We were talking about fighting women. Someone's mentioned Eowyn in the chat. We were talking about Eowyn. That and said that she had a destiny fulfill. So she went against. So it's a good job that she went against her nature. But when that destiny was fulfilled, she did, embrace her feminine side and become a wife and a healer. And someone's also mentioned in terms of the mothers dying of grief, how Nana dies when Balder is killed. I guess we could talk a little bit more about Eowyn and what her journey represents, because she is very interesting indeed. Like she's sort of she comes across in the movies as sort of your typical feminist woman. Like she's like, I can go out there and fight like the men. I want to fight. I want to be in a battle. And she does end up doing that. And I kind of wonder what you think that sort of illustrates. Maybe that represents her integrating her inner king, perhaps.
Yes.
But I think you did definitely elaborate on it.
Well, first of all, coming back to this notion that all the mothers die of grief. So Eowyn, she has no female role models. Her her mother, her parents, were killed. Her aunt, that is Theoden's wife, also was killed, died, largely due to this influence of evil surrounding them and this constant threat of evil breaking in and destroying their society. So she is basically alone as a maiden, as a young woman. And although she appears to be, and I guess it's sort of around 20 or so years old. But actually, I think the time frame or the age range that she represents is more like about 14 or 15 years old. So I would see her as being, a young woman who's just began her menses. That this is the first initiation into womanhood. It is those changes that happen in the female body that are undeniable. Uh, that is the first initiation, and it is the realization that childhood is over because upon the first menstruation, we realize that, oh boy, now I could bear a
Yeah.
child. That's a huge responsibility and requires a maturation process, which in the more ancient times, ancient cultures, this was a very important rite of passage
Mm.
that has just basically been swept aside, and certainly with the introduction of birth control, that the message that came there is, oh, well, now we as women, we don't have to be responsible for our bodies, the function of our bodies. And in fact, we don't even have to really grow up. We can remain kind of adolescents for
Yeah.
an extended length of time. And then maybe at some point, when you're 30 or even 40, then you can grow up and, have a child and,
Mm.
do that thing. Whereas the natural function of the female and the recognition of our true power. So the true power of the feminine is strength through nurturance, not strength through, you know, going out and fighting on the battlefield with the rest of the guys. That's not what female power and strength is all
No.
about.
And I guess when you have that moment, nobody ever sort of stressed it to me as this, good and positive sign of growing up.
Yeah, that's right.
It was like this sort of thing, like, this is gonna happen to you once a month, and
Mhm.
you're gonna need this and that to deal with, and it's probably gonna hurt, but not that much. But it's probably gonna
Mhm.
hurt,
Mhm.
and then you sort of have it, and you don't have
Well,
any significance as to what it means. There's no initiation into that sort of club,
that's right.
and so you're just left there going, oh my goodness, what is this?
Yeah.
This is happening now. And I,
Yeah.
I guess a lot of women then get hold of birth control and stuff, and then they're like, oh good, I could
Mhm.
I could delay this responsibility, because
Mhm.
in fairness to women, it's not easy to have a child these days. Like,
Sure isn't.
everybody tells you that you should not have one when you're young.
Yeah.
Not at all. They say that's the worst thing. They say it's a death sentence. It'll end
Yeah.
your life.
That's right. It's
You'll never
terrible.
have fun again.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
you'll
know.
get fat and ugly and
Mm.
you won't be attractive anymore. Yeah, it's just terrible.
Yeah,
Oh
Terrible
yeah,
and
propaganda.
and you don't get
uh,
taught motherly skills either.
No,
Not
nothing. Well,
Yeah, and
and just menstruation, I mean, it was called the curse. Like, how terrible is that?
yeah,
You know, you're told as a young girl, like, okay, you know, you got this curse and you're going to have this thing go on every month and you can't get rid of it and it's going to go on until you get really old. And so, you know, that's just the way it is. And, you know, there was never any, at least not in my experience, there was never nothing connected to it that uh, implied that this was a sacred thing. You know, in the ancient goddess traditions, it was believed that when the young girl had her first period, they believed that it was the goddess giving the girl the gift of the blood so that she could bring forth life. And then it was
mm,
believed that at the time of menopause, when the menses stopped, that was another sacred rite of passage, whereby at that time the goddess gave the woman the gift of the blood to absorb within herself and give birth to wisdom. Now imagine if you
yeah,
had heard this as a young girl,
that
that
would have
this was,
been
yeah,
that would have been powerful. Instead, what I had was, well, I've become a pagan. And I respect everybody's choice of faith, but what I
hmm,
feel like I had was the dominant. I think there was still a dominant overarching cultural idea that goes back a long time that the period is a punishment.
yes, yeah, hmm,
yeah.
Definitely.
If it's not a punishment, then at least it's just horrible, and you're going to be miserable for so many days each
yeah,
month for
yeah,
years and years,
yeah,
and those years are also portrayed as being the years of your life.
mm,
And when you stop menstruating, then your life is basically over. And in terms of infantilization, people now are basically raised to be what I call sex kittens. They're supposed
yeah.
to be young, they are overly sexualized.
That's right. Oh,
And the impression I got by the time I was in my teens and I started to get interested in boys and everything, because I think some fell between the cracks between the parents and the school. So I think many parents didn't realize the responsibility in teaching those things to their kids. Or
right.
maybe they expected the school to do it, and the
Yeah.
school
Yeah.
didn't do it.
Outsourcing the what once was the wisdom of the ancestors, now outsourced to some other body
Yeah,
that is
and
engaged in propaganda and brainwashing.
yeah, so when neither the parents or the school took responsibility, then what you learned from was Hollywood.
Yeah.
Um, so it was this weird sense that if you got a boyfriend, of course you loved him, that was basically a given. Um, it wasn't mentioned at all that you can be infatuated basically due to hormones, which is
Right. Yeah.
definitely my impression of those years, in particular the
Mm-hmm.
earliest years,
Mm-hmm.
because the hormones are going crazy and you basically go around with rose-colored glasses on
Mm-hmm.
constantly, and you
Yeah.
need an outlet for that.
Yeah.
And then it became normalized with having boyfriends and everything, and
Mm.
it wasn't that and you were told that it's okay to sleep with him if you love him and if you want
Yeah.
him, if you want to,
Mm-hmm.
as long as it's
Mm-hmm.
voluntary, but it
Yeah.
was never a question if you should. it was more an expectation that it would happen because you quote unquote loved each other.
To say to a teenage girl, if you love him, how is she supposed to know what that is?
Yeah, really. How does anybody know what that is? Because that word has been weaponized. The word love is now a weapon. I mean, it's a marketing word. So all the deeper sacred meaning of love is no longer accessible. I mean, people say, "Oh, I love hamburgers," or "I love this car," or "I love, some other thing that really has nothing to do with the more sacred meaning of love." I prefer to use the word eros, because eros is really the life force of the universe. And if we can reclaim the meaning, the deeper meaning that is contained within our language, and start to take it back from the marketing and propaganda, then we can reconnect with some of the sacred. But to say love, what does it even mean? And especially in terms of younger people, teenagers who are growing up in this crazy world that we're in now, love is weaponized. So how do we reclaim what that meaning is and bring it back to something sacred? I think this is really one of the tasks at hand right now.
Yeah, and also bring back that older women do have a function in society. Basically, revive the crone.
Yes.
That archetype. I actually started working consciously with that in my 20s.
Wow, good for you.
I'm not. I don't quite remember why I started doing that, but it just felt to me like it was something I had to do. That as a woman, my function wasn't just to work, eat, sleep, repeat. I have always had a sense of a bit more meaning to life than that, and as that wisdom coming from the older generation was really lacking, that was definitely something I wanted to consciously work with. And it's definitely helped me come through some rough spots over the years since.
Yeah.
So, and that was basically because I didn't have that in my own life. Even if there are mothers and women around, we're still so segregated in age, within age groups these days. You're put together with people who happen to be born in the same year as yourself, and you basically stay with them for the next 18 years unless you have a sibling. So yeah, it's not really that intergenerational contact that used to be. And when it comes to this infantilization of men, in particular in the sexual sense, then they also see the expectation that when you get a girlfriend, you will get laid, basically. Because of course they are also high on hormones at that age. So I'm not bashing it at all. It's just the way men and women work at that age.
Yeah, of course.
And then you come up against that Madonna whore complex. Because if they get a girlfriend that doesn't want to have sex, I heard this so many times in my teen years, then she was uptight. But if she had too many boyfriends and had slept with everyone, then she's a slut. So It's really
Can't win
confusing
at it.
both for men and women, and we really have to rein this in. We have to get
Yeah.
control and educate people into controlling their sexuality.
Definitely.
We just have to, like, at the moment it's very difficult for young women to say no to men,
Mhm.
especially when they hit their 20s or
Mhm.
stuff like that. It's perceived as weird to
Yeah.
have not had a boyfriend and to have not had sex with him by
Mhm.
that time. And
Mhm.
so you will get women having sex with men whom they want to develop the long-term relationship with, because
Yeah.
how long are they going to hang around?
Yeah, well, that the message is, if you don't put out, then you will be rejected because there's so many other choices, right? So you meet a man who you feel could be a potential partner, and then you have sex with that man. For women, that sexual intercourse produces oxytocin, the bonding hormone. And so whether you like it or not, that there is just a biochemical thing that goes on where you feel bonded. And then
Yeah.
if because we haven't been given, um, both men and women have not been given in their younger years the capacity to understand, first of all, delayed gratification. I mean, that is the mark of maturing. That's what children have to learn how to delay gratification. That's part of learning to grow up, is that you
Yeah.
you don't, like a baby, just start screaming and get what you want. So there is that aspect of learning about delayed gratification, and then the next step is the deeper understanding of psychology, and just the learning about projection, how how powerful that would be to young teenagers, learning about this important aspect of what happens as they begin to go into puberty and become super attracted to the opposite sex. If
Yeah.
if it's just all hormones, oh, I want sex, and I'm going to go and get it, and then that's going to take care of it. But
Yeah.
what has not been taught, that is so essential, is the notion of projection. It's like, yeah, what you fall in love with at that age is a projection onto someone else, something that is actually in yourself that you need to integrate.
Mm-hmm.
That what we see in the other and call love is not love at all. You're not even seeing who the real person is there. You're seeing your projection plastered onto another human being who may or may not fit the projection. And until there is some kind of psychological awareness and understanding of that function, the function of projection, then we're kept in that infantile state without the tools to navigate that transition from childhood into adulthood and all the responsibilities that are required, including delayed gratification.
Yeah. And there's a reason why porn is free.
Oh God. Yeah.
It's
Oh,
literally a
Absolutely.
weapon.
oh
It's
my
been
God. Yes.
it's been used in war, literally.
Oh yeah. Of course.
Yeah, basically to neutralize the men
Uh-huh.
from
Oh yeah.
fighting back. Not going to mention which war. That can be a bit sensitive these days.
Yeah.
But it's literally a weapon.
Mhm.
And so much of the fighting between men and women on a general level comes back to sexuality. Because it decreases the trust in each other.
Oh.
Because it's not treated as the sacred thing it is, at least in my view.
Right.
I consider it extremely sacred.
Yeah.
Would just like to thank No More Brother War for the diamond, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Much appreciated. Yeah. You know, men don't trust women because they think they will leave. And women don't trust men because they think they will leave. So,
Yeah.
but they still want sex. So people just end up having sex and trust each other less and less as the years goes by. And it was really genius of them to drive that wedge between men and women, because divided we will fall.
That's right.
We are
and
so
the mothers
much.
die of grief.
Yeah.
Right. If the mother, the principle itself of being a bringer of life, if that is distorted and taken from us in terms of being a sacred experience, then what moves in to replace it? It's all of this superficial stuff and contributes to this infantilizing condition that it castrates everybody. It castrates men, it castrates women, and keeps men and women in that adolescent sort of state.
Yeah.
And if you're in that kind of state, you're much more easily manipulated by the powers that be, or what I like to call the forces of evil.
Yeah. Some of the images from the Council of Elrond definitely brings that to mind. I took some screenshots that are on film when they are talking about what to do with the ring and everyone starts fighting.
Yes. Yeah.
That is literally a picture of what is happening now. We are
That's
fighting
right.
each other instead of focusing on what
The
is
real
actually.
enemy.
Yeah, exactly. So, I sort of lost my train of thought.
Well, maybe I could just pick
yeah.
up the thread of Eowyn's desire to be a warrior, and what is actually going on there in terms of the psychology. That it's very clear in the scene where Eowyn meets Aragorn, and she's practicing with her sword, and Aragorn comes into the scene, and he holds up his sword, and there's a little encounter there, and he says to her, "You've some skill with the blade." And Eowyn replies, "Women of this country know that women without swords can still die upon them." So she feels that she has to participate as a warrior in protecting her people. But the motivation, Eowyn's deepest motivation, which does appear in where she encounters the Witch King, what motivates that in a woman, it's more like the mother bear instinct. So it's not really that she is wanting to be a man and get the glory and the valor, as she says. She doesn't want to be in a cage. She tells Aragorn, he says, "What do you fear, my lady?" She says, "A cage, to be kept behind bars until use and old age accept them, and all opportunity for valor is lost. So she fears that what's going to happen to her is that she's going to be locked up. She's going to be kept in a cage of some kind, and basically have no life whatsoever.
And that is
So
literally what women are told by the feminists. You know, if you want to be a stay-at-home mom and everything like that, then you're a kept woman. You know, you are basically your husband's hostage. Almost. You're a captive.
Yeah, they analyze it in purely Marxist material terms.
Exactly.
So they say, this person does not have the power with their own money to acquire capital, therefore they are being oppressed.
Yeah.
Which is a very stupid way to look at things.
And superficial. Like just so superficial and ridiculous that it's incredible that has been you know, what people follow. Like what?
And that is something that the right wing doesn't really pick up on, I think, because they I have seen plenty of analyzations of this and everything, and so many, in particular men, come from it. Well, it's natural for a woman to take care of the children, be nurturing and all of that, but they don't capture the emotions of it. So they are doing it on a purely biological standpoint, and they aren't able to activate the emotions behind it. So what a woman basically is hearing is that they are told by the feminists that your husband just wants to keep you barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. And then the right wing comes, well, I want my wife pregnant and barefoot in the kitchen, basically. They're playing exactly into the propaganda. And, you know, it really irritating for me, and I'm not even a natural born housewife. I've never really fit into that, but I've also never wanted to be a working mother or anything like that. So when you are that in between, you don't really know where your place is.
That's
and you are basically just put in that state where they just want to keep you captive, and there's that is what's best for you. So what a woman will hear is that it's best for you to be kept captive. And getting to know men on the right wing over the last couple of years and everything, there are so many good men on this side who really don't see it that way. But what you often see in chats and on social media are those angry little boys who do see it that way. And when that is what you see, then it will scare women away. And then comes the complaints on where are all the women? We have lost the women. We have lost the endwives.
Where are the women? Where can I acquire a trad waifu?
Yeah.
There does not appear to be any.
And then some women react in going into so-called rad femme or something. I can't keep up with the labels of everything. Who are basically right-wing feminists. And it's just one constant fight over again and again and again. It's so annoying. If people could just get together and just talk openly without being offended.
And understand the deeper psychology. I think that really what you're saying is that what's missing here on both ends, no matter which direction you look at it, whether it's from a woman's point of view, a man's point of view, or politically right perspective or a politically left perspective, the bottom line is we don't have, at least available to the people, and especially young people, knowledge of psychology.
Yeah.
That if all of us were given that and have had access to that knowledge, and given some tools, especially while we're still younger, for how to navigate this tricky terrain of the initiation into adulthood without meaningful and sacred rituals of initiation, then
Yeah.
that psychological maturity is not able to come to pass unless you do it on your own, right?
So I have a thought right
Hmm.
now. When Eowyn, gets into battle, she gets what she wants. And I feel in a lot of way, modern woman has also got a lot of what she thought she wanted. She got to do pretty much exactly the same thing as a man. And I notice when Eowyn goes into battle, she slays the foe,
Yeah,
but it's really, really taken it out of her.
yeah.
She's totally depleted. She's spent. She has to be restored
Yeah, she
by
goes
Aragorn
through
in
a
the form
death.
of
Yeah,
virile
it's a
masculinity
death.
again.
Yeah, and that I love that scene where where Aragorn is healing her, and that's an image of the integration of the king. So in that scene, Eowyn realizes that Aragorn is her inner king. That what she had done was project her inner king onto him. And then she wanted to participate in his world. She wanted to be, like him, or at least follow him in his path, and not fulfill her own destiny of realizing her feminine power. But in that healing moment after she undergoes it's a death for the purpose of rebirth there, and she engages in the battle, though, again, out of like a mother bear instinct. Like she's there to protect her family, her people. That's the
Yeah, and
motivation. She's not there to have everybody go, "Oh wow, you're the greatest." No, Eowyn, you're awesome. You're the,
yeah, and
warrior. Yeah.
as a princess, she is
Uh-huh.
brought up in that her people is her responsibility.
Yeah, she's a shield maiden of Rohan.
Yeah, so it's not like not in a derogatory way, but a peasant woman, just some random woman from a village that oh, I want to fight for my people. No, she is a princess. She has been brought up to have that sort of responsibility, but with a lack of feminine influence, she doesn't
That's
really
right.
know how to
How to do it.
how to put that out in the world. There are some details that is in the books that isn't in the films that I definitely find interesting. Her fight with the Witch King of Angmar is basically driven to protect her father figure, Theoden,
Yes.
who is
Right.
mortally wounded. So again, it's that protective instinct. And the King of Angmar has heard the prophecy that no man can kill him.
Yes.
So he has really taken that to, oh, I'm immortal.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have all this power given through Sauron. And when Eowyn reveals that she's a woman, he is taken aback. It's more clearly in the books than in the show, but he doesn't, oh shit.
Yeah. Uh-oh. I missed that.
Yeah, does the prophecy apply then? Is it that a man can kill me, but does that equal a woman as well? And then Mary comes in, and I think in the movies that it basically just have a regular sword, considering it is dull and has to be sharpened. But in the books, that is a dagger that they got from the Barrow Wights. And the Barrows was the graves of the Dunedain before the kingdom fell.
Ah.
And the weapons that were stored there was magical weapons, specifically designed to defeat the Witch King of Angmar and his people, who was enforced by magic. And when the kingdom fell, the king of Angmar put in the Barrow Wights there to keep people away from it, and sort of, I have conquered your grave, so I have conquered your line, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then the hobbits get their daggers from that Barrow Wight when Tom Bombadil has defeated them. And that is the weapon Mary is using. And by injuring the Witch King of Angmar with that weapon, he is weakened. So Eowyn is able to inflict the mortal wound. So in that I see that it's so easy for someone, in particular in hubris, to sow the seeds for their own downfall. And also how the inheritance of those who come before you will serve you in the future. It can be used as a weapon against your enemies, their knowledge, and represented here by the dagger.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
The other another perspective in terms of the relationship between Eowyn and Mary. Mary in that context is the representation of Eowyn's developing relationship to her inner masculine. So her young animus is depicted in the form of Mary, and she is developing a relationship to her inner king through the symbolism of meeting the young masculine who's still kind of childlike, like Mary and Pippin are childlike. They're images of the young developing masculine, and a woman in her own psychological development has to begin relating to the inner masculine as he grows up within, right? So the animus isn't there just already a fully grown up king. It's the internal dynamic, the relationship that goes on the inside as a woman develops into an adult. That inner masculine has to also go through levels of maturation that match the development of the masculine in terms of this king, warrior, magician, lover archetypal structure. So it goes on the inside as well as the outside.
Some of those things you just hit on, magician, lover, warrior archetype. I had to take a little break, nip out. Have we touched on precisely what those archetypes are?
Not yet, but I could certainly do that now if that seems appropriate.
That would be cool.
Okay. Well, primarily this archetypal structure, this fourfold or quadrated structure, uh, comes out of the work of a Jungian analyst named Robert Moore, who wrote extensively on these four archetypes that he determined as being the foundational pieces of the masculine psyche, and that the development in each of these aspects is what forms the whole self in the masculine, and it also applies to the feminine in feminine form. But for now, we'll just talk about how it shows up in masculine psychology. So the king. So let's say that capital K kingship is the archetype of wholeness and maturity in a man, and contained within that archetype of capital K king is these four pieces, these cornerstones. So the small K king, what that actually means is the leadership capacity. So a man, in order to be a mature king, needs to develop in himself this quality of leadership. And in order to do that, a man has to come to the realization of what that means in terms of the purpose of his own life. So there must be a sense of purpose and meaning that a man has to come into contact with in himself. And from there, he is motivated to build a realm. So the function of the masculine principle at large is to build stuff, to build structure, and to create places of safety, security, and comfort within which the feminine can feel safe and secure enough to be vulnerable to bring forth life, to be vulnerable enough to bring forth life. And so this small K king function is the development in a man of this sense of purpose and meaning in his life, and that leadership is a part of that. And it doesn't mean that every man has to be, the big leader. It simply means that an individual man is developing that kingly quality in his own life, building a realm, a home, a family, a business, a community, and that in those roles in his own daily life, he expresses that leadership that is born out of his own desire and passion, really, for meaning and purpose. And ultimately, a man who has attained this level of inner maturity and a sense of personal authority that he has developed as a part of his own learning. Men need to do things and to feel a sense of competence in what they do and how they act and behave.
Hmm.
And if they don't have that deep sense of inner authority and acknowledging their own development, like feeling good about themselves, that they've accomplished some things and they can show the results. Oh, look, I did this, or I created this business, and now I'm employing numbers of people, and I'm building my home, and I'm taking care of my family, and this is what men of kingly stature do, and it is essential and innate. And then ultimately, a man who is coming out of that place, that mature place, then he is one who blesses others. I mean, in many of the stories, and I'm sure you've come across this in your own studies of mythology and fairy tales, that the role of the king is to bless others. It was said that to be seen by the king was to be blessed. if the king looked at you and saw you, that in itself was a blessing, provided he was a good king, right? Um, it's never about domination. This domination idea
Yeah.
is not that comes out of immaturity and a lack of confidence and a lack of feeling of authority. So
Mm.
this dominator bullying kind of thing moves in to cover up and replace um, the natural authority, and to cover up the deep levels of fear and inadequacy
Well,
that.
yeah. It was like the teachers with the most natural authority in school never really had to shout.
Yeah.
Hmm. Right.
Yeah. One point to that I think is shown quite clearly with Pippin,
Uh-huh.
because he is the most irresponsible of all the
Mhm.
hobbits, who
Mhm.
are basically children, metaphorically, in the story.
Yes.
And Mary says to, I think it was Aragorn, when Pippin and Gandalf go to Gondor, that he often brought himself and Pippin into trouble, but he was always there to get him out of it.
Yeah.
And so Pippin never really developed in that sense.
Mm.
He could always count on Mary to sort everything out.
Mhm.
And when he goes into service for Denethor, then he has to learn to take responsibility. And
Yeah.
as Galadriel said, you will find your courage, Pippin.
Yes.
And that is what he does by
Mhm.
entering that service and starting to stand on his own feet.
Mhm.
And that is so important for development of men.
It sure is.
Having
Mhm.
the opportunity to learn to take responsibility and to live up to that. And in that process, of course, they will fail. They will fall
Mhm.
down, and then you get back on your feet and
Yes.
start again.
Mm.
You don't give up.
Which makes me then think that there's not a lot of opportunity for many young men to take a lot of responsibility
Mm.
these days,
Exactly.
because it is a lot more difficult to develop your own business or to even
Yeah.
get a job.
That's right. Mm.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're eternally left feeling like they don't have anything that they could control,
Yeah.
which traps them in a perpetual adolescence.
And not
Yeah.
only that, but throughout school and everything, they see that the girls are being prioritized. Their natural
Yeah.
instincts are demonized as ADHD and
Oh,
other
yeah.
behavioral problems. So they get the sense that everything about them is unnatural. And with the propaganda that, with so-called toxic masculinity and everything,
Yeah. Mhm.
masculinity have its toxic sides just as femininity does.
That's right.
But now it's the positive male characteristics that are demonized.
Yeah.
And it just makes my blood boil. It
Oh,
really
yeah.
angers me.
I think
Well, it's castration.
Yeah.
This is what castration means.
mm,
Is that
this
the phallic, the sacredness of phallic energy has been twisted and turned into something evil, or at least it's named that. This natural instinct for men to claim that their phallic masculinity, which is that sense of power and authority that comes out of this initiation into kingship. The in the in the films, you talked about the daggers coming from um, Bombadil and that aspect of the story in the novels. What I found interesting in the films is that it is Galadriel who gives the hobbits the daggers, and that's the
Yeah.
equivalent of giving them their phallic energy. And
Yeah.
I think it's very powerful that it comes from Galadriel, who is the symbol of the great goddess. So in a
Mm.
sense, it's like she is giving them their phallic energy so that they can mature and grow and become kings in their own right, which they do through their own individual hero's journey.
That are That
Yeah.
is excellent points. I think this might be a good time to let a man voice into this.
Mm.
In your videos on the masculinity, you had a clip from Jakob Kierkegaard,
Mm-hmm.
and he has
Mm.
12 rules.
Yes.
Not rules, but principles
Yes.
for a man to mature. And I captured the audio for that. So
Wonderful. Yeah, that's great stuff.
yeah, because in one sense, I feel that it's a bit wrong. Isn't the right word? Maybe it's I don't feel completely competent about talking about how to develop masculinity for men.
Mm-hmm.
So I do like to get the point of view from men who know
Mm-hmm.
what they're
Yeah.
talking about and have walked the walk and not just talk
Yeah.
the talk.
Yes.
So let's take a few minutes with Jacob.
All right.
Jacob Kierkegaard encapsulates the path to kingship with his 12 initiatory steps to becoming a man.
1. Build true brotherhood with other men. 2. Detach from and create a grown-up relationship with your mother. 3. Master your sexual energy. 4. The fundamental meditation experience. I am not my thoughts, emotions, and bodily sensations. 5. Master aggression and fear. Prove discipline and commitment. 6. Embrace and integrate your inner feminine. 7. Honor your father, but become your own man. 8. Accept death as a fact of life and as a path of evolution. 9. Find and live your soul's mission, living from a place of meaning. 10. Deal with and thrive amongst highly feminine women without losing your focus and without being an asshole. 11. Change your perspective radically once in a while. And 12, embrace mysticism, embrace the unknown.
So I definitely think that is good points he's making. And with this whole bearing, you can tell that he has walked the walk. He has that grounded, good masculine energy about him. And that was actually something I always missed growing up. That positive, strong, masculine energy in the society. And that's not to say that I didn't have good men in my life. I definitely did. And I think that was one of the reasons why I never felt for the war between men and women. I've always rejected that. I have never been at war with my men in general. And but still that strong, grounded male energy has been absent at large. And that is, in my opinion, one reason why our society is spiraling out of control.
Yeah.
we do need those strong, grounded men.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I personally grew up very devoid of masculine influence, of like a strong and authoritative type.
Mm-hmm.
To clarify, yes, I definitely had a dad and he was around, but I don't think any of the men in my life felt empowered to be as protective and authoritative as they would previously have been
Right.
for women.
Mhm.
And I also went to school in a setting where there was only women, and so it was very confusing learning how to deal with the masculine. So I guess just because of limited experience of the masculine, I did fall into the trap of demonizing men
Mm.
for a while, because all you ever heard was secondhand, and all you ever heard was bad.
Yeah. And when the role models that are rolled out to us for what constitutes mature masculinity, well, there isn't any really, and so as a result, the lack of kingship and the lack of mature men who are not castrated, when that is a function in the culture, then the people will project that out and attach that need for true kingship, attach that on to authority figures in the outer world. So that, why is it that there is such an emotional context around certain people? Let's just use Donald Trump as an example, okay? Because it was such a blatant and obvious experience of projecting kingship onto a human, obviously flawed, but nevertheless, for whatever reason, that man, Donald Trump, was able to capture that projection.
Yeah.
And so the people who loved him saw him as he's the king, he's our king. And
yeah,
the people
literally
who
king
hated him,
emperor.
yeah, yeah. And the people who hated him, well, then he's the shadow king.
Yeah.
But that leaves the people still bereft of bringing that forth in their own selves. And so
Yeah.
then you project all your power onto this one individual, and then if that individual is not very mature or psychologically integrated himself, then if you're someone who is feeling this projection come to you, like you're the king, I'm the best, then if you don't have that ability to take a step back and realize, okay, people are projecting all this onto me, but I'm not really that. I'm just a regular human trying to, do my best, sort of thing. Well, then that individual is going to identify with that projection and then become filled with hubris and think they are the king. And this is happening to authority figures all around the world.
Yeah.
It's inflation. It's called inflation, and it's like
I-
grandiosity and hubris, but it's based on the lack of inner psychological integration and that inability to separate themselves from the projection. So they think they are the projection. And so then they act that out, and then the people never get to the place of realizing that, well, wait a minute, I should not be projecting my power and authority out to this individual out there. I should be taking charge of my own life and being a leader and a builder of realms that I can master in my own day-to-day life. mean, a true king is a man who has mastered his own outer world and inner world. It's not about somebody who's like, okay, I'm the king of the world now, everybody. Follow me, do what I tell you. That's a way to keep the people infantilized and to encourage hubris and dysfunctional behavior in people who really have no right to be in a position of authority.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely think to put it in context of the story, we see that hubris thing with Boromir and Denethor,
Oh yeah,
because
that's right.
they don't want to give up power. They don't want to give up the stewardship for the return of the king. And that is contrasted to Faramir, who is the more humble sort, and who is willing to give up the power of the stewardship for the rightful king. I do find it a bit interesting with the dynamic of those three men. Because Faramir comments that Denethor is very much like Boromir. They are very strong, both of them. But considering that both Faramir and Denethor had that more psychic ability, I do wonder if Denethor in reality was more like Faramir, but he wanted to be the warrior and strong, competent leader that he sees in Boromir, and that he projects onto his son and wants him to live that out. So that comes into not integrating well within yourself.
Yeah.
And we see Boromir's fall and then redemption at the end. Because he is so used to thinking as a man in war, so
and carrying the projection of his father.
Yeah, definitely.
So his father saw him as simply a tool to obtain something that he wanted. So that was the real wounding that Denethor did to his sons, that he didn't see them. He didn't see who they really were. He saw them simply as a means of getting something that would make him feel powerful. And I think another factor involved there is that it's the lack of connection to the lover archetype, particularly because Denethor has no wife, and therefore Faramir and Boromir have no mother. So again, there's no feminine influence. There is nothing there that provides these very powerful and capable men and true courageous warriors, but they don't have that connection to the inner feminine, the ability to. Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned the lover archetype and being connected to it. I guess we could explain a bit more what that means to be connected to the lover archetype for men. And also Aragorn, the rightful true king, is connected to the lover archetype. Well, he is a lover of Arwen.
Yes. Well, just to give a bit of a definition of what the lover archetype is, and again, it's the language is our language is so corrupted that as soon as you hear lover, you immediately think, or most people do, that it's a sexual thing. That it's about sexual relationship. And that is obviously a part of it, but really the archetype of the lover is that part of the psyche in both men and women that brings us into the present moment to appreciate the aliveness in the body. it's a it's all about appreciation of the senses, of just the basic experience of being a human with consciousness living in a physical animal body, and being able to fully appreciate that using our senses, and through that to experience ecstasy, joy, bliss, artistic creativity and spontaneity, and that childlike wonder. This all comes from the relationship to the inner lover archetype. And also through that we find compassion and empathy. So it is in a sense that it's childlike but not childish.
And I suppose there's a great demonization or a making of it as sexual when men show this towards one another, because it's got me thinking of how, you know, there's very close love between male friends
Mm-hmm.
in Lord of the Rings. But when I look it up and I look for Sam and Frodo, I look at the titles on these Google images that I'm looking up, and the articles are like, are they gay?
Oh God, yeah.
And every pairing, Sam and Frodo, I don't know, Merry and Pippin, and Legolas and Gimli, and Boromir and someone else. Like every time it was just because they had these fast, like steadfast friendships where they were openly affectionate towards each other. It was like, are they gay?
Yeah.
And this is why men are so scared to flipping be expressive and genuine
and
towards
support
each other.
like to really support and love each other as men in a man's way. That has been denigrated and twisted into this other kind of propaganda that is designed to castrate. Because I mean, male to male bonding is a profound and sacred thing, and without that, as it has been and obviously was for thousands of years in terms of our ancestors. I mean, going off to the hunt, going off to battle. I mean, this is what the masculine does. They bond at that level. Like men bond more in a shoulder to shoulder fashion, like doing things together and engaging in activities, sometimes dangerous, because that's, men do that. That's what men do, and they compete with each other in order to further develop their skills and to become stronger and to become better, more mature men. But this has all been denigrated. This has now been turned into something bad and then twisted into all of this homoerotic stuff, which that's not what it is at all.
It's absurd. It's absurd.
Yeah.
I've never understood that reasoning. Why is everything...
Well, it isn't reasonable.
No, exactly. But
propaganda.
Why is everything...
Psychological warfare.
Yeah, why is everything supposed to be to have some sexual undertone? And that is definitely a projection, I would say. And how to put it? I definitely want our men to start forming those bonds again. Reestablishing.
And they are.
Yeah.
This is, it is happening in a, it's kind of below the radar, but I certainly see it happening.
Yeah.
Thankfully.
I would like to see the resurface of men's clubs and everything as well. So, give them their own space.
Yeah.
Women are allowed to have our own spaces, at least up to now. Now they are being invaded by men who think they are women, but
I know. Oh God. Oh,
they're coming for us as well.
Oh, don't even talk to that.
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, just
Yeah.
wait until the new woke brigade gets a hold of the little hairy women that Gimli is talking about.
Oh boy. Oh my God.
There are no dwarf women.
Oh dear.
Yeah. So
I predominantly, I
yeah.
have to say, I predominantly find this misconception of strong platonic male friendships being perpetuated by teenage girls. They always seem to confuse it for love. Or at least that seems the way in fandom culture, that teenage girls seem to be particularly susceptible for shipping male friends.
I do think
Perhaps
that is
because they can't conceive of a relationship with a man in a way other than romantic.
I think the homosexual propaganda plays a part in that.
Oh yeah.
So they
It's part of
are
the castration. It's
yeah.
it's a function of castration.
And then it diverts the understanding nature of women, the compassionate nature, where homosexuals are suppressed and they have to hide, and if two guys then show love for each other that is purely platonic, then the girl will, oh, they must be gay, oh yes, and want to quote unquote empower them, and
Yeah.
it's really just a projection.
Yeah, and not only that, it's a distortion of that feminine instinct to nurture and care for children and those who are in need of help. So it's again a way to usurp these natural instincts and turn them around and turn them into a direction that is nothing to do with what that instinct is there for.
I spent time on the left. It was a lot of women looking for baby substitutes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. They would always come at it from a place of caring for everyone and wanting everyone to be valid and feel valid and never have hurt feelings. And
Yeah.
I quickly got very bored of it. I guess I came at it because I didn't have a complete data set on going in to the left. So I was looking at things like, oh, well, these type of people get put in prison more, or these type of men earn more than women, and I didn't have the full data set as to why that would be, and so I thought, oh, that's not fair.
Right.
So I was just there going, yeah, I wonder why people are just being unfair for no reason. I'd experienced a fair amount of people being unfair for no reason to me as well. So I could believe that people would do that. But I guess I have maybe less of the nurturing instinct, or a different type of nurturing instinct to some women, because it soon became very apparent to me how everyone was always basing everything off of their feelings.
Yeah.
All the time, and what you feel ruled everything. It didn't matter what the facts were, it didn't matter what intentions were, it was just feelings all the time. And then I come across the actual data that I need to get on the right, and it's, you try and pass some of that on to people, and it's just utterly rejected. because they're not working on that basis.
Hmm.
I guess it's the left is sort of the feminine gone rampant in many ways. Maybe that digressed from the point. It was a
No, I
bit
think
rambling.
that's right on. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. That yeah, the the natural ways that human beings, men and women, are designed to express themselves has been twisted by design. This is what I call evil. That and this agenda has been evolving for a very long time. This is not a new thing. What where we find ourselves now is not a new thing. It's not like, oh my God, all of a sudden this is being done to people. No, no, no. This has been, evolving over a very long period of time. This kind of control method that is really militarized psychological warfare. And it's what's really shocking is how well it works. What's really interesting too is that when I started learning about all these things, um, this was like 30 some odd years ago that we went through all of this 30 years ago. And at that time, there I was very involved in a group studying Jungian psychology, dedicated to studying Jungian psychology, and there came a series of lectures by Eugene Monich and other men. Eugene Monich's books, Castration and Male Rage, and Phallus, Sacred Image of the Masculine, are two of the books I reference, and also King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, that I reference in my piece on the king. And so this was being written about and discussed in very deep ways 30 years ago. And there were men's groups, there were men's drumming groups, and a lot of really profound and powerful transformative things were going on with men at that time, and men were coming to understand this king, warrior, magician, lover thing, and they were working on themselves at that level. And because this was a Jungian group, um, it was all about depth psychology and really digging deep into where the wounds are and how do we heal that and how do we reclaim our masculine selves in order to be wise, mature men of kingly stature, so that we can be what the women want and need. Because at the same time, we as women were getting into the goddess mythology and learning more about the psychology of the feminine,
I mean,
because that was a new thing too.
it's certainly what attracted me to ancient Indo-European faiths, that I saw
Mhm.
in the divine also the representation of that half of the divine, which is feminine, and in all of its many varied archetypes. Because I felt like other spiritualities had one option, and that was mother archetype,
Mhm.
like very, very nurturing mother archetype, which is not necessarily the sum total. Well, definitely not the sum total of what all women are.
Mm-mm.
And
Yeah, and
so,
you have
yeah,
to
I
let
guess
go.
this was being explored. And what do you think? Sorry to interrupt you there, but what do you think
No, no.
interrupted it?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, after going through that and learning all these things and participating in a lot of rituals and get-togethers. So our women's group would get together with the men's group, and we would do rituals. We would dance and drum and things of that nature. So there was a coming together as well. It wasn't just, okay, the men are going off to do their thing and the women are going off to do their thing. No, we wanted to come back together, and we wanted to bring the knowledge that we were learning about ourselves, trying to come together and create from there a more mature kind of relationship between men and women. And it was happening, and it was a wonderful thing, and lots of good stuff came out of that. But then something happened that I think is a product of this intense psychological warfare that kind of moved in and then repressed all of that again. It's like, what happened to all of this? Like, why is this knowledge, why hasn't it been passed on to the younger generations who came after my generation?
I think
I think that was
I
an
think
effort to keep it repressed.
yeah, I think I've frequented the equivalent circles in Norway when I looked into shamanism.
Aha.
Because where I lived at the time, there was a group I came into contact with who we went to the beach and had ceremonies and everything. And it was a very tight-knit group, but most of them were older than I am. Some was your generation, some was maybe born in the 60s and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I didn't participate myself, but they had groups for women and groups for men, where they could cultivate, the masculine and the feminine, but there was also that coming together and, having a wonderful time together. But I didn't really see that much outside of it. And of course, with where some of the feminine went, you have ended up with feminist groups having vagina gazings together, where they literally sit with a mirror and look at their own vaginas.
Man. Oh, yeah.
And,
it's
that's
just what?
just one more point in that. Is that where they get a bit fanatical about getting in touch with your inner goddess.
Right.
So it just is completely imbalanced.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't really, like, as someone who has both gods and goddesses, if I were to venerate only the goddesses, I would be leaving so many essential qualities out of my life that I need to ask for help with. Like, if I do not ask Thunor for help with strength and will and fighting, if I don't ask Odin for the sort of wisdom that he provides, as opposed to the sort of wisdom that someone like Freya or Frigg provides, he's got more of the cunning about him. If I don't...
Just going back to your earlier point of the mother archetype being the only thing available.
Yeah.
One point in that, when we see the very scarce information we have of the Norse religion, they went to extreme lengths to eradicate the name of Freya, because Freya isn't her name. That's her title.
Oh.
It means... Freyr is a lord. Of course, my mind is blanking on the female equivalent. What is that?
Freya is just lady.
Yeah, lady.
Literally,
of course, it's lady. Yeah, but she did have a name. But only her title has been passed
so
down. I heard another theory earlier this week, on Thursday, I think it was, of how some things in the Norse religion doesn't really make sense. For example, that Odin is the supreme god. of all of the gods. Because some think it should be Thor, because he is the thunder god that is so prevalent in other European religions. In the Mediterranean and in the Slavic traditions.
The way that I see that is Odin is very much a priest archetype, and therefore, he seems to have control over death somewhat as well. So I guess if Odin is your priest archetype, he is above the earthly plane of he is above the warrior caste.
Yeah.
So I guess when you have Thor, he seems to represent more the warrior to me, and Tyr seems to represent that side of kingly justice, because I see those two as sort of separate.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about that aspect of it, and the details of it isn't really my point here. My point is that our early traditions have been subverted for a long time.
Yeah.
Into in this aspect with the feminine with Freya, and there might be something questionable about the male archetypes as well. So it's definitely something to keep in mind, and that the sources we do have, we should keep that in mind with all of this subversion that might have gone on, because many of the Norse sources was written down by Christians, and in particular Snorri. So the point of view will be slightly different from what it originally was. And we definitely went on a bit of a tangent there.
Yes, a little bit.
Yeah.
No, it's very interesting. Yeah.
For my own part, when it comes to not being that subverted by feminism, I won't claim I wasn't completely, because I think that is unrealistic these days. But my own mother, she was forced back to work before she wanted to. I was only 3 months old when I was put into daycare. No. That was way too early. That really had big consequences for me. She didn't do it because she wanted to go to work instead, but she was given the option of coming back to work or be fired. And there were young people, young married couple with children and mortgage and everything, and she knew the people who worked in with the babies in the daycare, and she trusted them. Yeah. She didn't trust just anyone, but that was personal friends of hers. So she took that choice. So I don't hold any grudges for that now. But when at 4 years old, I was told by the feminists that worked in the daycare that they had won the fight to choose if they wanted to work or stay at home. I knew that wasn't true. I knew that lie from the start, because I've always known that my mother was forced to place me in daycare at that age. So that gave me a very early foundation to start to see through the lies. And so my perspective was a bit different. So I was able to start to unpick those lies fairly early. I was still affected by it, and some stuff I didn't even think about. For example, getting extra point for university just because I'm a woman. I didn't really think about that is really just silly. If we're all
Yeah.
equal, then why do
Yeah.
I have to have extra point based on what I have or have not between my legs?
Yeah.
It's just
Oh dear.
it's
Yeah.
just silly, and just seeing through the whining of the women on TV and everything. For example, nurses complaining about how awful their work was, while also knowing that they had chosen their own career. So, okay, do something else. Stop complaining. It was just taking on that victim status. It was always someone else's fault and systemic faults that had to be corrected. And that doesn't mean that a system doesn't have faults that should be corrected, but when that is basically your whole ideology.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
fight,
and I think it. Oh, go ahead.
fighting the state and corporations and everything that also at the same time have your back. It just didn't make sense to me. So while my thinking is primarily dominated by feelings, those early experiences gave me the ability to have a logical structure around it.
Yeah.
So that I'm not overwhelmed by the watery feelings, to put it in elemental terms. Water is connected to feelings, and it's really easy to basically drown in them. And I do
That's
think
right.
many women do that, because those currents can be so strong that it can be really hard to swim in the oceans of
Absolutely.
feeling.
And if your own instincts have been suppressed by force, almost like you said, you knew that your mother didn't want to go back to work. So I think that what's happening now is that women have been so brainwashed that they don't even know that they don't want to be in that situation. That the natural instinct is to be with your children and to do what women have always done, and that is tend to the children and the household, and to the feeling environment. So yes, the emotional realm, the realm of water, is the realm of feeling, and yes, you can drown and be overwhelmed and swept off into insanity if you don't have enough of a connection to the inner masculine that calls you out and says, whoa, wait a minute, that's not rational. Let's balance this out with a little bit of, some logic and some thinking, and, take a breath, and let's try to get some space from the emotional turmoil.
Yeah.
That apparently is gone now. So that a
Equally.
lot of women don't even know when they,
Mm.
continue to pursue their career, and okay, I've been, had my maternity leave. Now it's time to farm the kids out to the daycare and go back to work. And it's true that in order to just survive these days, unless you're extremely wealthy, it's true that both parents pretty much have to work for the most part.
It is
I will
possible.
say.
It is possible to organize a life so that it's easier, at least, to survive on one income, or
Yeah.
that the women have some part-time stuff, or sell some services that can be done from the house.
That's right. Yeah.
But still part-time. I will say one thing that I've seen from, in particular, mothers within the first year. Because now in Norway we have 1 year maternity leave, or 10 months with full pay, and I think it's 80% pay if you take 12 months.
Wow. Wow.
Now the father has to take a third, and the mother has a third, and the last third, they can do as they please, so to speak. But what I've seen many women say is that they don't want to leave their baby. They don't want to put him in daycare. However, they are really bored because there are no adults around. All they do all day long is talk baby talk. So they long for that adult companionship that they would have in earlier times when people didn't commute to work.
Right, where you had a whole community.
Exactly. So you had that stimulation from an adult mind. And not just...
Yeah, it was so isolated.
Yeah, it's very isolated these days. That is...
And that also is by design. It's part of the divide and conquer agenda.
So that is part of what is driving women back to work. I see both men and women, because often it's the men take the last part of the maternity year. So they often have a hand in adjusting the baby to daycare. It's a process, and neither the woman or the man want to leave them there.
That's right.
The staff literally has to chase them out. Because both of them know it's wrong.
That's right.
And
that's heartbreaking.
Yeah, and the baby doesn't know time. It doesn't know that the parents will come back. All they know is that they're left with strangers and a bunch of other kids. And of course, I don't remember starting in daycare because I was only 3 months old. But I do remember feeling very insecure because the environment was so chaotic. It was a lot of kids with few adults, and basically the kids were just running amok. And for my personality type, that was very wrong. I needed more stability than that. So and in the long run, I do think that would make a child more complacent, easier to follow the rules.
Well,
do as you're told.
Deeply traumatizing.
Exactly.
Deeply traumatizing.
Yeah,
and
I've dealt with that.
Trauma, if that trauma is not addressed, then it festers in the unconscious and contributes to the problems we're dealing with today. The infantilization, the lack of maturity, the dysfunctional behavior of every sort, the addictions, which is actually a defense to try to manage this trauma that never gets dealt with.
Yeah.
Certainly is a huge topic. I feel like there's so much more we could say. I mean, I feel like I had a point about how women who've left the feminist scene can overcompensate and go too much towards the masculine rational side of thinking after seeing the feminine run rampant. And just all sorts of thoughts are definitely occurring to me right now. We are coming up to 2 hours and a half, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we better wrap up for the night. Because I'm not sure everyone can take much more information in.
This has just been great. I've so enjoyed this.
Yeah, so have I. I think we could basically keep talking all night. But
maybe we'll have to discuss the fact that Balrogs are female next time.
And
did somebody put that out?
Yeah, in the chat.
Oh my god.
And also, Shelob as a positive female role model. Discuss.
Oh,
I suppose we'll have to
No,
take that
not
on
a
the list.
positive female role model. But yeah, woo,
No.
that's a subject right there.
Yeah, I do. My own conclusion is that we definitely need to have more talks about this. I think we've barely scratched the surface, so I would love to continue at a later date with this.
Oh, I would too.
Yeah. It would be very interesting to continue this discussion because there certainly isn't a lot of discussion of gender relations or how we can sort them out through reference to mythology or people trying to create epic works for our time. So that would be very much a good thing to continue discussion upon. But Loralee, perhaps you might say where the audience can find you and some of your work.
Oh,
I think
okay.
I shall get your website and drop it in the chat as well.
Oh, that would be great. That would be probably easier than me, rattling it off. Yeah, so
on
all of my
YouTube,
go ahead.
YouTube, the links are in the description, so you can go get them
I'll
there.
just drop it in D-Live.
Yeah, I have been meticulous of dropping your links.
Oh, well, bless you.
For the videos. It's my pleasure. I think they are thought-provoking and gives a bit of guidance that is sorely needed these days. So thank you so much for the brilliant work you've done so far.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for inviting me. And I just would add that I'm also a Jungian astrologer. So that is my my personal work that I do, private practice, personal counseling, and work with individuals using astrology, psychology, and mythology. So that information is also on my website. On the so if you go to the home page, you'll find my astrology, and then my work. Eowyn's Sword is the write-up, like the introduction into the Lord of the Rings work, and then there's a page that has the presentations, my presentations, and then a couple of other interviews that I've done on the subject with people. And eventually I'm going to I'd love to have this posted on my site too, but I need a lot of help with doing my website tech stuff, so I have to kind of wait to get all that lined up. Anyway, it's out there. Yeah. And I am in eventually, I hope, going to be carrying on with my analysis, looking into other aspects. So I've already done the characters in the story, and then I'm moving on in the next 2 or 3 episodes. I'll be talking more about the symbolism of light, water, trees, and animals in Lord of the Rings. So that's still to come.
Light and water are definitely rabbit holes.
Boy, no kidding.
I've barely scratched it.
Fascinating.
Oh yeah, definitely. So the link for your personal page is LL Astrology.
-LOTR.com.
So the link I put in will take them to the page of your presentations.
All right.
So you can find the rest on the page. I would like to close out the show with 5 minutes of audio from The Return of the King.
Wonderful.
It's basically my favorite scene of the entire movies. Yeah, each time I see them, that is the scene I play at least 3 times. And
wow.
I get goosebumps all over my body and teary-eyed and everything every single time. I think it's the wounded king who finds his strength. That imagery has always been very touching for me, and that is basically what that scene entails. So
Now, I can't hear, like when you've played clips and stuff, I can't hear them.
No. I don't know how to get that into your side. But you,
okay.
If Katrina will put a link to YouTube into our private chat, then you can just press that link and it will open in another tab, and you can listen from there.
Wonderful.
So thank you so much for coming on. We are having a break for the summer, but we will definitely like to have you on when we get back.
I would love it.
Okay, so that is all for this season, everyone.
Yes.
We don't have
Good night.
We haven't set a date for when we'll be back. We will get back to that. So please follow us on Telegram and Twitter and Gab for updates.
Yes.
So yeah, have a wonderful summer, everyone. I will definitely miss all of you guys. I'm getting emotional now, just like I did when our Christmas streams were done. So yes, I am a woman.
Well, bless you both, and I hope you have a wonderful break time and some good summer fun.
Yeah.
So thank you again, and blessings also to all of your listeners.
Yes.
Thank you. So,
hope everyone who still has much of Sunday left has a good one. Happy 4th of July to the Americans.
Happy 4th of July.
Yeah, and good night.
Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Go back to the abyss! Fall into the nothingness that awaits you and your master.
Do you not know death when you see it, old man? This is my power.
Get out!
You have failed. The world of men will fall.
Courage, Mary. Courage for our friends.
Form ranks, you maggots! Form ranks! Pikes in front! Archers behind!
Hey, man! Take your area down the left flank! Gamling, follow the king's banner down the center. Grimmauld, take your company right after you pass the wall. Forth, and fear no darkness! Arise! Arise, riders of Theoden! Spears shall be shaken! Shields shall be splintered! A sword day! A red day! Ere the